So I've recently been watching The Office and I noticed something that a lot of people seem to skim over, and it's that Jim Halpert is one of the worst characters on The Office. My opinion of Jim is very straightforward. I think he's one of the most dickish, selfish, and mean characters on The Office. And during my research, I found that not many articles really explain my reasoning for why I think Jim is a straight douchebag. Even this one from BuzzFeed that shares the same opinion as me just brings up irrelevant points, which, I mean, it's BuzzFeed, so I don't know what I expected going into it. But again, most of the articles don't actually analyze why Jim's actions are asshole-ish. Before I start, I want to make one thing clear. Jim is not that unlikable for around the first 2 to 3 seasons. I believe around season 3 is really when his character starts falling apart. This doesn't mean his character doesn't have flaws in seasons 1, 2, and 3, but his actions do take more drastic measures during the later seasons. It would be easiest to lay out the reasons for Jim's character being terrible by categories, so first I'm going to start off with his relationships we see in the show, because honestly they show quite a bit about Jim's character. So early on in The Office, Katie is the first real relationship we see Jim in, and it's the relationship that sparked my hatred towards him. In the Booze Cruise episode, his breakup with Katie is not only one of the most awkward scenes on the show, but it's one of the most asshole things he does. Now let's retrace back to the situation though. Jim asks a girl he barely likes to go on a cruise with him just so he can feel better about not having Pam. Which is fine because this season is really trying to drive the Jim-Pam relationship, and I understand why he felt he had to break up with her. But there is no logical reason whatsoever for him to break it off with her while they're still on the boat. It only adds to how much Jim couldn't care less about literally anyone but himself. Again, I understand this scene is supposed to show that Jim likes Pam so much he's willing to sabotage his own relationship, but it's just done wrong. No one, and I mean no one, would do something like that. Now later on in the season we see Jim and Pam finally kiss, and it's one of the greatest scenes in the show. However, Pam still believes she should marry Roy. Jim, in what is one of the only good decisions he makes throughout the show, accepts a promotion to the Stanford branch so he can leave this failed love story behind. This takes us to our next relationship, which I believe shows how much Jim just doesn't care, and this relationship is his relationship with Karen. It's a widely accepted opinion that Jim's treatment of Karen was honestly just plain messed up. It's in this relationship that we see Jim lie, whine, and just repeatedly lead Karen on until he sees an opportunity to get with Pam. When questioned about his crush on Pam, Jim isn't honest and just straight out says he never had a thing for her, which everyone knows is a complete lie. He whines about how Karen and him shouldn't live together or even be near each other because in Jim's words, it would be like we were living together. And in the end, Jim ends up dumping Karen in order to be with his true love, Pam. Now don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Jim-Pam love story. In fact, I believe it carries a good portion of the show, but I don't think it's good enough to overlook these character flaws. That brings me to my next point, which is Jim and Pam's relationship. So I expect this part to trigger a lot of people because how could such a good relationship have flaws? When this relationship starts, it's pretty awesome, but there are 3 main events that happen that I honestly just can't get over when rewatching this series. I'm going to do these in chronological order, so let's get started with the first piece of evidence, which is Jim buying Pam a house. While on the surface it's just a big romantic gesture, it's a terrible decision on Jim's part, and this is not the only time we will see Jim Halpert make a big life decision without telling Pam. I also believe this point about Jim buying the house without Pam is widely accepted to be just plain stupid and not believable. Even if it was believable, it just doesn't make any sense and comes out as plain selfish. After all, Jim really only bought the house because it belonged to his parents. Through all of this, Jim just assumes Pam is going to be okay with this idea, which yeah, ultimately she is okay with it, but his plan could have easily taken a turn in the wrong direction had Pam hated the house. The next time Jim makes another big life decision without Pam is when we begin to hear about Athlete, a company that his friend started based off an idea Jim had in college. It's fine to have hopes and dreams, but it's never okay to make a huge decision such as taking a job far away from your current living quarters and not tell your significant other. He also does this in such a quick fashion. Just take a look at this scene where he accepts the job.
Hey man, it's Halpert. Did you go to the other guy yet? Great, don't. I'm in. Yeah, I'm all in. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye. Yeah!
I would have more understanding for this decision in the show had there not been many issues with it after he accepted the job. But him going to Philly just opens up this big can of worms in Jim and Pam's relationship, and it almost drives them apart permanently. And the next thing Jim does after this is he throws $10,000 out of both their pockets in order to, I quote, look like a team player. This is one of the dumbest things I've heard, and it doesn't make any sense as to why Jim does this. He's just plain foolish, and it goes to show that this man doesn't understand how to not sabotage his own relationships. So that's about it for relationships. The next big issue I had with Jim was his pranks on Dwight. The pranks he pulls on Dwight are very humorous, and they bring a lot of memorable moments to the show. And I understand that there needs to be these kinds of moments in a show to make it good. And a lot of pranks he does on Dwight are usually harmless. But there is one episode in particular that really sums up my feelings for how Jim treats Dwight. That episode is conflict resolution. This episode was a blessing because it revealed how frustrating Jim was actually making Dwight's work environment. Let's be honest for a moment. Most people hate where they work. Now let's imagine you finally landed a job that you genuinely cared about, only for someone to be a constant nuisance to every waking minute of your job. Now I wouldn't have much of a problem with this, but the only reason the show gives for why Jim picks on Dwight is that Dwight is a weirdo. Jim straight up just jumps back to high school days and bullies the nerdiest kid he can find. That is what has been going on for what is said to be in the show about 4 years of them working together. The scene in particular that really opened my eyes a lot, and I hope opened the eyes of others, is this scene in conflict resolution.
My name, it said diapers.
Just a simple macro. You know, these actually don't sound that funny, one after another. But he does deserve it, though.
By the end of the day, my desk was about 2 feet closer to the copier.
Yeah, I just moved it an inch every time I went to the bathroom. And that's how I spent my entire day that day.
So in conflict resolution, we are shown all of Dwight's complaints about Jim, and we begin to see the kind of toll it takes on both parties. Just look at the defeat in Jim's eyes as he realizes he has been really affecting someone's life by doing what he deems as harmless pranks. And it looks as though Jim's character will change for the better after this, but it doesn't. Jim just continues to pick on Dwight throughout the later seasons and even affects other people, such as when he lets Michael fall into the koi pond. I would go on and on about Jim's pranks on Dwight, but I honestly think that this one scene is enough, and it just sums up my point so well that I'm just gonna leave it there. So my last point is that Jim wasn't that great of a father. What I mean by this isn't that Jim was a terrible dad. What I mean is, it seems as though Jim genuinely enjoys his life better without Pam and the kids. There's even a scene in which he straight up admits this, and it's when he starts living with Daryl in Philly. So what do we have so far? Jim's a bully, an asshole to women, and a terrible father. How can people like this character? I honestly don't know. You are entitled to your own opinion, so if you guys think I missed something or think one of the reasons I listed doesn't prove my point, I'd honestly love to hear you guys' responses. And I do really enjoy the Jim and Pam love story, and it's, in my opinion, one of the main reasons the show is so good. So the next cinema and thought video will be on The Office, but not on one specific character. The next video is going to dive deep into why The Office starts off great but begins to fall off during the later seasons. Have a good one, guys. See you in the next one.